Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar. WADR, promoting dialogue.
WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar. Good evening and welcome to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and online on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. First, our headline stories. President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana delivers his last State of the Nation address ahead of the handing over ceremony on January 7.
I'm happy to report that our country's territorial integrity is intact and all our borders are secure. In a neighborhood of widespread instability, Ghana, by the grace of God, remains the only country in the neighborhood that has not fallen victim to terrorist violence.
Victims of the Nzerukuri Stadium stampede in Guinea to file a complaint against event organizers over delayed justice.
The parents of the victims, of the people who died, continue to mourn. I think some are more and more recovering from this tragic situation, but I think most of them are asking for justice.
Mainstream and influential foreign politicians gear up for the October presidential polls amid calls for reforms and inclusivity, and Senegal's enter the global gas market with the Grand Turtle Amayim project. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and welcome to our listeners within and outside the sub-region. Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo today Friday delivered his last State of the Nation address, SONA, before the Parliament. The address, which aligns with Article 67 of the 1992 Constitution, focused on the state of Ghana's economy, covering key topics such as macroeconomic indicators, GDP growth, inflation, international reserves, job creation, infrastructure development, and security. President Akufo-Addo provided an update on the country's progress before handing over office to the newly elected president, John Dramani Mahama, as the 8th Parliament nears its dissolution.
Mr. Speaker, it is important to state at the outset that serving the Ghanaian people as president has been the greatest honor of my life. It has been one of great challenges and even greater triumphs, one that has demanded every ounce of my energy, commitment, and love for our beloved country. My vision has always been to see a Ghana that is self-reliant, prosperous, and united, a beacon of hope, democracy, and opportunity in Africa and beyond. That vision remains undimmed, and I'm confident that the strides we have made together will propel Ghana to even greater heights. Mr. Speaker, the first responsibility of a government is the safety and security of the state and its people. I'm happy to report that our country's territorial integrity is intact and all our borders are secure. In a neighborhood of widespread instability, it is no longer an assumption that we can make that our land will be safe and secure. Ghana, by the grace of God, remains the only country in the neighborhood that has not fallen victim to terrorist violence. It has taken a lot of concerted effort, and dare I say a lot of money, to enable us to protect our country from the ravages of the variety of terrorist groups operating and destabilizing other countries in the neighborhood.
Ghana's outgoing president, Nana Akufo-Addo, speaking there, still in Ghana. Not everyone, including lawmakers, has welcomed and acknowledged the achievements outlined by President Nana Akufo-Addo during his 8 years in office. A member of parliament and sponsor of the famous anti-gay bill, Sam George, described Akufo-Addo's address, and I quote, misleading. The lawmaker asserted that the president deliberately refused to touch on key issues such as inflation, the high exchange rate, unemployment, and the nation's debt profile, among others. Sam George, speaking to journalists at the National Assembly shortly after Akufo-Addo's address, insists that Ghanaians are suffering from economic policies by the outgoing administration. Let's listen.
He misled the House when the president claims that he took over a country where the power was off, the lights were off. That's not true. In 2016, there was no doom. So today, as we speak, we have a debt of 2.7 billion in the energy sector. So the president cannot say he's leaving with the lights turned on. The lights are on with a huge debt that's sitting there. You know, yesterday they had to come and hurriedly lay the appropriation on account because they realized the folly of their actions when they failed to do that before Parliament rose before Christmas, because it was only during the Christmas break that they realized that they had to pay external coupons tomorrow. And that's why they quickly came to Parliament yesterday to lay on account. That's the recklessness of this government. It's not because they love the Ghanaian worker. It's because they're going to default on coupons on the Eurobond. The president came to do a state of the nations, failed to speak about the cathedral that he promised God, failed to speak about foreign exchange rates, the fact that he took over the currency, the US dollar at 4, and today the US dollar is around 17, failed to talk about petrol prices, failed to talk about any of the other things that affect the ordinary Ghanaian. The president did not just only come and peddle untruths, but he grossly misled the House. The president didn't say anything about the LGBTQ bill. He said he will sign it so long as the courts dispense of the case. The courts have dispensed of the case. It's been almost a month. So you see, the president clearly is completely out of touch. The president says that Agenda 111, he's completed a number of them. He counts the 111 as 1 + 1 + 1 equals to 3. Because out of 111, the president has only commissioned 3. And the 3 he's commissioned, let me state on record, there is no equipment in them. They're empty buildings, shell buildings. So he's not commissioned a single building. He's the first president to start his administration with an IMF program and exiting an IMF program.
Sam George is a lawmaker in Ghana and sponsor of the famous anti-gay bill. Now, in Guinea, more than a month after the deadly stampede at the Nzerikore Stadium, the victims are still waiting for justice. While the authorities put the official death toll at 56, a collective of NGOs in the region reported 135 people killed in the tragic incident. These human rights organizations denounced the opacity of the judicial measures taken by the transitional government in the matter. The NGOs are organizing with the victims to file a complaint against the organizers of the tournament, who are influential figures in the country. Fasu Emmanuel Sano is a spokesperson for the Nzerikore Human Rights NGO collective.
Les parents des victimes, des personnes qui sont décédées.
The parents of the victims, of the people who died, continue to mourn. I think most of them have already buried their dead. I think some are more and more recovering from this tragic situation. But I think most of them are asking for justice. What we regret is that so far there has been no sanction against anyone, and yet the organizers of these tournaments are known. The governors, the mayors, and the ministers who were there are all there. The governor, even as a conservative, has not announced any sanctions against these state figures. The work we are doing with the victims is to identify them, to organize them, and to explain to them the good reason to file a complaint against those who were the authors of this tragedy. So the victims must know what happened, and it's their rights. And so, as we are human rights defenders, we must bear with them their grief in front of the court, so that we know what really happened, so that the case is translated in front of the competent courts, so that there is justice. This is extremely important. What I know is that there have been a lot of victims. To accompany these victims, We have to discover the truth of what really happened.
Nous allons vers la vérité, ce qui s'est réellement passé.
Faso Emmanuel Sano is a spokesman for the Nzerikore Human Rights NGO Collective.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Well, Newslink continues as we cross over to the Central Sahel region, where the United Nations, in its latest report, says the humanitarian crisis there is worrying. According to the report, the populations of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger continue to suffer the consequences of persistent insecurity. Christopher Ticho has the rest of the details.
According to the United Nations report, the Central Sahel region remains plagued by massive population displacement and enormous humanitarian needs. According to the United Nations document, between October and December 2024, 619 security incidents were recorded in the region. This represents an increase from the previous 2 months, a development that testifies to the intensity of clashes in the region, thus increasing humanitarian needs. The document continues. According to the report, in September 2024, Mali already had more than 378,000 internally displaced persons, IDPs. In Niger, 162,000 IDPs were registered, while Burkina Faso also recorded a total of 2.1 million IDPs. The three countries currently have a total of 2.6 million IDPs. This represents a slight decrease of 3% compared to the previous month. But the humanitarian situation remains difficult. Vulnerable populations in the Central Sahel face acute food insecurity and high levels of malnutrition. Estimate reveals that over 8 million people in the region are experiencing a food crisis. Limited access to basic services further aggravate the situation.
Christopher Aticho reporting there will remain in the Sahel because the Malian Office of the Auditor General has released a report detailing significant financial irregularities within the Universal Access Fund Management Agency from 2020 to 2023. The findings implicate former Prime Minister Shogel Maiga in mismanagement and unauthorized expenditures raising political stakes. Eche Atisu tells us more.
The 113-page report from Mali's Office of the Auditor General outlines significant irregularities, including a 20 billion CFA franc loan granted to the public treasury in 2020 and unaccounted funds intended for public services. While Shogel Maiga was not Prime Minister at the time of the loan, other actions under his tenure from 2021 to 2023 are directly linked to him. The Auditor General highlighted numerous questionable expenses, including unjustified staff benefits, such as phone subscriptions worth 13 million CFA francs and missing school equipment valued at 15 million CFA francs. Public broadcaster ORTM is also owed 92 million CFA francs that remains unpaid. In 2023, Maiga allegedly sanctioned 2 trips financed by unplanned sovereignty expenses totaling 47 million CFA francs, expenses deemed non-compliant with financial regulations. While the former Prime Minister's camp denies the allegations, calling them politically motivated, the case has been referred to the Supreme Court's account section. Maiga, dismissed in November 2024, following disagreements with the ruling military, is suspected of nurturing presidential ambitions, a potential motive for targeting him, some say. The timing of the report, released just weeks after Maiga's dismissal, has raised eyebrows, with critics suggesting it could be an attempt to discredit him. Meanwhile, Mali's transitional government has reiterated its commitment to fighting corruption, a promise that resonates strongly with the public.
Eche Atisu reporting there. Ahead of the October 2025 presidential election in Côte d'Ivoire, opposition parties are urging the government to initiate a political dialogue. Already, the electoral process began with revision of the voter register, which ended in November last year. The president of the PDCI, Tijan Cham, and FPI, Pascal Afin-Gwason, addressed the public during their New Year's messages emphasizing the importance of peaceful and inclusive elections. Augustine Colley has more.
For the president of the Ivorian Popular Front, FPR, former Prime Minister Pascal Affi-N'Guessan, transparency and impartiality are crucial for the upcoming October presidential election. He called for electoral system reforms ahead of the polls.
This presidential election must be a fair contest, pitting projects against records. It must not be a charade. All conditions for a free and transparent election must be met. The electoral code must be reformed. The independence of the Electoral Commission must be guaranteed. The voter register must clearly be reopened and consolidated.
At the Democratic Party of Cote d'Ivoire, PDCR, the primary opposition party, there is a similar call for the resumption of political dialogue before the election. Tijan Cham is PDCR's president.
May
2025 bring a peaceful, transparent, and inclusive presidential election. We demand that election results be announced at the polling stations themselves, booth by booth. This is essential and indispensable for ensuring transparency in the votes. Finally, we believe that political dialogue is crucial before this election.
Meanwhile, Guillaume Soro, former parliamentary speaker and prime minister, has announced his imminent return from 6 years of exile. Despite being ineligible to run due to a conviction in Cote d'Ivoire, he has expressed his intention to contest in the upcoming election. Other opposition figures, including former President Laurent Gbagbo, also currently ineligible, have joined calls for assurances of an inclusive electoral process. In his New Year's address, President Alassane Ouattara reassured the nation of peaceful, transparent and democratic elections in October.
Nkole reporting. Augustine Kole with that report.
Listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal.
Well, you are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM. Here's a reminder of our top stories. President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana delivers his last State of the Nation address ahead of the handing over ceremony on January 7. Victims of the Nzeri Stadium stampede to file a complaint against event organizers over delayed justice. Mainstream and influential Ivorian politicians gear up for the October presidential polls amid calls for reforms and inclusivity. Senegal. Ahead in the news, Senegal enters the global gas market with the Grand Tortue Amehem project. Stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Now talking oil and gas, Senegal has registered itself in the global oil and energy sector after commencing natural gas production through the Grand Tortue Amehem GTA project. The project is a collaboration between Mauritania's national hydrocarbon company and the global energy giants BP and Cosmos Energy. This initiative marks Senegal's emergence as a key player in the global liquefied natural gas market, positioning West Africa firmly on the world energy map. The project integrates cutting-edge technology to extract and process natural gas. Key infrastructures include a floating production, storage and offloading unit and an FLNG vessel, enabling the first phase to produce up to 2.5 million tons of liquefied natural gas annually. With reserves estimated at 422 billion cubic meters, this project has transformative potential for Senegal's economy and addressing local energy needs. Well, let's take you to Nigeria, where former presidential candidate of the Labour Party and opposition politician Peter Obi has called on President Bola Tinubu to demonstrate leadership by tackling the high cost of governance and its adverse effect on Nigeria's economy. From Abuja, Usman Umar reports.
In an address, the former presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, stressed that President Tinubu must lead from the front, beginning with a reduction in the cost of governance. The former Anambra State governor argued that this step is crucial to curbing Nigeria's rising public debt, which he said has ballooned under the current administration. He also emphasized that borrowings should be tied to projects that bring tangible development rather than being used for consumption. Peter Obi expressed concern over the state of the country's public infrastructure, pointing out that government officials often mismanage public funds through frequent foreign trips. He proposed that President Tinubu should travel by road occasionally to experience firsthand the poor condition of the nation's highways. He also condemned the ongoing poverty crisis in Nigeria, pointing to the stampedes for palliatives as a sign of the dire situation. He criticized the new minimum wage, which he argued has not done enough to alleviate hunger and suffering.
The newly approved minimum wage of 70,000 cannot afford a bag of rice or even half bag of beans. As a result, many Nigerians go to bed hungry. While significant number now rely on palliatives and charitable support, tragically, this has recently led to several avoidable deaths.
Security was another key issue Peter Obi addressed, calling the current situation of banditry, terrorism and kidnapping unfortunate, and emphasized the needless loss of lives across the country. Finally, Obi called for a thorough review of the proposed tax reforms, stressing that taxation should be based on the country's productivity. He argued that a nation with widespread poverty should prioritize development before imposing heavy taxes on its citizens.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, the guest segment takes us back to Ghana, where President Akufo-Addo delivered his last State of the Nation address in line with Article 67 of the 1992 Constitution. The address, among other things, covered issues of the economy and social infrastructure, among others. Well, ahead of the address, we engaged the political analyst, Dr. Asa Asante, and has been sharing his thoughts with us.
To start with, I must say that State of the Nation address in Ghana is, a requirement by law. That is Article 67 of the 1992 Constitution of Ghana. Makes it mandatory for the president to give a State of Nation address beginning every session of Parliament and then before the dissolution of Parliament. You know that next week Parliament will be dissolved and a new Parliament will be born. So by the dictates of the Constitution, the president has no choice than to deliver his last State of Nation address. Incidentally, it's going to be the last one because our Constitution does not permit the president to have more than 2 terms in office. And the last election, the results, the verdict is out there, which you know already, that the president party lost overwhelmingly. And then, so they couldn't maintain power. But that aside, I expect that the address will touch on the economy, the social areas, and then the financial state of the country. It is critical that these areas are highlighted because they are the movers and shakers of the Ghanaian society, for which reason government spend a lot of resources there to make sure that they build the frontiers of these areas and make it more important. We also expect the president to touch on the social issues that confront the society and how they've been able to navigate their way through that, those areas. And of course, we want to know the financial situation of the country.
The current administration always pats their back that they are putting in place measures to recover the Ghanaian economy back to pre-COVID era. And of course, recent indicators in terms of GDP growth pointing to some significant growth. Should the president be concerned about the realities of the ordinary Ghanaian at this time while exiting power, or the president should excite himself with the records of statistics which seems to be differing from the realities of the ordinary Ghanaian?
Governance, you proceed in governance with the truth, and the truth should lead you at all times. It doesn't matter how terrible a situation may be or be confronting the society. The people put you there to represent their interests, hopes, and aspirations. So if there are factors that militate against any of these things I've mentioned, it is important for you, the duty bearer, to point it out so that going forward, the society which vested you with the power will be able to find solution to that. So on that score, I don't expect the president to deviate from this and give us something that is not in line with what exists on the ground.
Dr. Asa Asante is a Ghanaian political scientist. Up next is sports news with Sankule Janko.
Hello out there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. 2025 is shaping up to be a significant year for Senegal's national football team, with pivotal matches on the horizon. In March, the Teranga Lions will face Sudan and Togo in critical encounters, followed by clashes against the DR Congo and Mauritania, all part of the 2026 World Cup qualifiers according to soccer. Adding to this, Senegal will compete in the Africa Cup of Nations AFCON Morocco 2025, entering as one of the tournament favorites. To meet these challenges, the Senegalese Football Federation is taking proactive steps to strengthen the squad, focusing on recruiting dual national players. Among the potential players is Eli Kamara, a 21-year-old right-back excelling at Standard League. Would Yusuf Sabali's retirement leaving a void at right back? Kamara's dynamic performances could offer a solution to Senegal's defensive concerns. The Football Federation has reportedly contacted his representatives, hoping to secure his commitment to the national team, according to Soccer. This effort follows successful pursuits of goalkeeper Yovan Diouf and Malik Chow, who are set to join the team in March. Elsewhere, former Nigeria international Peter Neketen has cautioned the Nigeria Football Federation (NFF) against appointing a foreign coach to lead the Super Eagles in the upcoming World Cup qualifiers set to resume in March, according to Brila. Neketen believes that introducing a foreign coach at this critical juncture could be detrimental given Nigeria's current standing in the qualifiers. In an interview with Brila.net, Neketen emphasized the importance of continuity. He noted that the players have already established a working relationship with the current coaching staff. He urged that bringing in a foreign coach unfamiliar with African football could require additional time for adoption, time that he claimed Nigeria cannot afford. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
Sports was brought to you by Sankule Janko. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mao Jojuv, Sheikh Njai, and Umu Danyogo for technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR News, on Facebook, WADR English Service, and stream live on WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a replay of In the Sahel, WADR's Security and Governance Program. I'm Abdullah Hassan. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.3